So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities. Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end. He feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food. Analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavat Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment, and the qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting the gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. I offer my most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord. This is acknowledged by all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Shri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Nadiradi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. Chantamani Prakara Sadma Sukalpa Vriksha Laksha Vritesha Surabhira Vipaliantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamanam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kwananta Aravinda Dalayataksham Garhabhatam Samasitam Barhabhatam Samasitam Buddhasundarangam Kandarpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kala Sadvana Malya Vamsi Gidam Pranayakeli Ratnam Gidam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Chibangalalitam Niyata Prakasam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani yasya sakalendriya vrittimanti Pasyanti panti kalyanti chiram jaganti Ananda chinmaya sadujvala vigrahasya Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedesa Durlavam Adurlavam Atma Bhakto Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manaso Munipungamanam Sopyasti Yat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tattve Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chaitam Jagananda Kotim Yat Chakti Rasti Jagananda Chayaya Danta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajastataiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusaha Suktaryameva Nigama Pratitastuvanti Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Patibhavitabhis Tabirya Eva Nijarupataya Kalabhihi Goloka Eva Nivasata Kilatma Bhuto Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksadeva Hridayesa Vilokayanti Ya Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Niyamena Tistan Nana Avatara Makarod Bhuvane Sukintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramaha Pumamyo Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhuto Jagananda Koti Koti Svasesa Vasudadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahmaniskalam Anantam Ashesha Bhutam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Mayahi Yasya Jagananda Satani Sute Dragun Yatad Vishayaveda Vitayamanam Sattva Valambi Parasattvam Visuddha Sattvam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasu Yaprani Nampati Phalam Smaratam Upetya Lilayatena Bhuvanani Jaya Lilayatena Bhuvanani Jayat Yajasram Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nichadamni Talechatasya Devi Mahesa Haridama Sute Sutesu Tete Prabhava Nichaya Vitaschayena Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shasthe Stati Pralaya Sadhana Saktireka Jayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga Ichana Rupam Apiyasya Chachestate Sa Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Dadi Vikara Visesa Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pitagasti Heto Yasambutam Apitata Samapaitikarya Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Diparchareva hi dasantaramabhyapetya. Dipayate vivita hetu samanu dharma. Yastadrikeva hi cha vishnutaya vibhati. Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami. Yakarna narna vajale bhajatisma yoga. Vidramananta jagadanda saroma kopaha. Adhara shaktim avalambya param swamurtim. Govindamadi purisham tamaham bhajami. Yasyaik nisvasitakala matavalambya. Jivanti loma villaja. Jivanti loma villaja jagannadanataha. Vishnu Mahansahi Yasya Kala Vishesho. Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Basman Yatasma Sakalesa Nijesa Tejaha. Swiyam Kiyat Prakatayat Apitadvatatra. Brahma Yahesa Jagananda Vidana Karta. Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Yat Pada Palavayugam Vinidaya Kumbha. Dvande Pranama Samayesa Ganadi Rajaha. Vignan Vihantam Alamasya Jagatrayasya. Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Agnir Mahi Gaganamambu Maruddisascha. Kalastatatma Manasiti Jagatrayani. Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Vishanti Amcha. Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Yachchak Suresa Savita Sakalagrahanam. Raja Samasta Suramurti Sesa Tejaha. Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakami. Dharmo Tapapa Nichaya Sutayastapamsi. Brahma Dikita Patagava Deyascha Jivaha. Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava. Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Yastrindra Lokam Atavendra Hoswakarma. Mahoswakarma Pandana Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti. Karmani Nirdhati Kintu Chabakti Bhajam. Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Yam Krodha Kama Sahaja Pranayadi Bitti. Vatsalya Moha Guru Gaurava Sevya Bhavahai. Sanchintya Tasya Sadrasim Tanamapurete. Govindamadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Shriya Kanta Kanta Paramapurusha Kalpataravo. Drumabhunish Chintamani Ganamayi Toyam Amritam. Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivamsi Priyasaki. Chid Anandam Jyotiparam Apitad Asvadyam Apicha. Sayatra Shiradibihi Shravati Shirabibhyascha Sumahan. Nime Sardakyo Rajati Nahiyatrapi Samaya. Bhaje Srita Dvipam Tamaham Iha Golakam Itiyam. Vidantaste Santakshiti Viralacharakati Paye. Shishopanishadi Ki Jai. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Ishavaishamidam Sarvam Jatkinja Jagatyam Jagatina Taktena Bunjitaha Magridaha Kasasviddanam. Purvani Vakarmani Jijiva Chekchatam Samaha Evam Twayi Nanyatetosti Nakarma Lipite Nare Asuya Namate Loka Andinas Tamasavritaha Tamste Pritya Bigachanti Eki Chatma Hano Janaha Anujadika Manasoja Viyo Nena Devam Apavam Pavam Asata Davato Nyana Teti Tista Tasminapumata Visvadadati Tadi Jitita Nejite Tadure Tadvantike Tadantarasya Sarvasya Tadu Sarvasya Syabhayataha Yastu Sarvadi Bhutani Atmani Evanupasyati Sarvabhute Suchatmanam Tatona Vichigupsate Yasvin Sarvani Bhutani Atmeva Bhut Vijanataha Tatrako Mahakahasoka Ekatvam Anupasyataha Saprega Chukamakaya Navaram Asnaviram Sudam Apapavidam Kavir Manisi Paribu Swayambu Yatatat Yatorutan Vyadadach Jasvidipyaha Samabhyaha Andam Tamaha Pravisanti Ye Vidyam Upasyate Tato Bhuyayvate Tamo Yayu Vidyayam Rataha Anya Devaha Vidyaya Anya Dahura Vidyaya Itisya Srimadiranam Yenaschad Vichachaksire Vidyam cha yastad vedo bayam saha vidyaya militum titva vidyayam ritamasnate Andham tamaha pravisanti ye sambhutim upasate tato bhuyavate tomo ya yusambhutam rataha Anyadeva Sambhavat, Anyadav Sambhavat, Iti Susrumadiranam Yenastad Vichachakside. Sambhutim cha vinasam cha yastad vidubayam saha vinasena miniturn titva sambhutam ritamasnate. Hiranmayana patrena satyasya pietam mukam tatvam pusamapavrinu satyadharmaya dristaye. Usanika seyamasriya prajapatya vyuha rasmin samaha tejo yate rupam kalyanatamam tate pasyami yo savaso purushaha sohamasmi. Vayuranilam amritam atidam basmantam sarinam om krato smara kritam smara krato smara kritam smara. Om Agni Naya Supatara Yasman Vishwani Deva Vayunani Vivan Yo Dajmas Chuhurana Mino Buyastam Tenama Utim Vidama Om Tatsat. Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, verse 27 again. We go right into the discussion. So yesterday we heard from the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1, and also we heard from Brahma Samhita 5.1, and we also heard from Brahma Samhita 5.2. Okay, so no, we'd stop there. Okay, so Sri Brahma Samhita 5.2 says, the spiritual place of transcendental pastimes of Krishna is portrayed in the second verse of the Brahma Samhita. The super excellent station of Krishna, which is known as Gokula, has thousands of petals and a corolla like that of a lotus sprouted from a part of his infinitary aspect, the whirl of the leaves being the actual abode of Krishna. So obviously the language of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is very, very high, or the summit of English language. And he uses beautiful phrases that you probably never encountered before. And obviously, it's rightfully so, because he's describing something that's in the spiritual world, not in the material world. Anyway, this verse explains the abode of Krishna in the spiritual world. And he says, Gokula, like Goloka, is not a created mundane plane, unbounded. It's not a created mundane plane, dash. So if he begins by saying what it's not, then he says, an unbounded character forms the display of his unlimited potency and his propagating manifestation. So Krishna has an infinite personality. He's an infinite person. Therefore, right away, that eliminates our possibility of understanding him completely, because we are limited. He is unlimited, right? And he has unlimited potencies also. And he's propagating manifestations in the spiritual world and the material world. And then it says Baladeva is the mainstay of that energy. So this unbounded character and unlimited potency or energy is also represented by Baladeva. The transcendental entity of Baladeva has two aspects. That is, infinite spiritual manifestation and infinite accommodating space for insentient gross things. So Balaram is the support of all of Krishna's pastimes, whether in the spiritual world or in the material world. And he's supplying all the energy, in a sense. It all comes from Krishna, but he is non-different than Krishna. So anyway, I'm not going to read all of this because the language is very, let's say, elevated, and in order to understand what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada is talking about, it happens gradually. It's not going to happen just by a reading. So basically, this second verse of Brahma Samhita explains the transcendental abode of Krishna. But what are we looking at? We're looking at what different scriptures that explain the transcendental qualities of Krishna. So there, Bhaktisiddhanta mentions, Sri Sanatana Goswami has told us as follows in his Brihad Bhagavatamrita, which embodies the final essence of all the books of instructions. And what does he say there? What does Sanatana Goswami say? He says, he, meaning Krishna, displays his pastimes here in this land as he used to do in Goloka. The difference between the two planes lies only in their locations as high and low. That is, in other words, Krishna plays exactly the same part in Goloka as he exhibits on the mundane plane of Gokula. There is practically no difference between Gokula and Goloka, save that what exists in the shape of Goloka in the upper region is the same as Gokula on the mundane plane when Krishna showed his various activity there. Sri Jiva Goswami has also inculcated the same in the Bhagavat Sandarbha of his 6 treatises. So you have these 2 books, the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, we have a copy of it here in our library, and we have the Bhagavat Sandarbha, 6 different books by Jiva Goswami, which I'm not sure if we have it or not in our library. I hope we do. To ascertain the plane of Goloka Vrindavana is the eternal abode of Krishna, and Goloka and Vrindavana are identically one. And though both are identical, yet Krishna's inconceivable energy has made Goloka the acme of his spiritual kingdom and Gokula of Mathura province, forming a part of that mundane plane, which is also a manifestation of the tri-quadrantal vibhuti, conducting majesty. So in other words, this Goloka Vrindavan, when it's manifested in the material world, is called Gokula. And there's really no difference between them, but obviously Krishna sometimes manifests things in Gokula that may or may not be manifested in Goloka. But anyway, the idea is that Krishna appears in the material world in order to attract the living entities. And he manifests his internal transcendental potencies and pastimes. They're very confidential, just to give a taste to the living entities in the material world, how wonderful it is to go back to Godhead and be experiencing these transcendental pastimes all the time. So he says, poor human understanding cannot possibly make out how the extensive tri-quadrantal, which is beyond human comprehension, can be accommodated in the limited nether material universe of an unquadrantal disclosure of a uniquadrantal disclosure. So in other words, there's one dimension, more or less he's saying there's one dimension in the material world that we perceive, but there's much more than one dimension in the spiritual world that is being perceived by the inhabitants. So Gokula is a spiritual plane, hence his condescended position in the region of the material space, time, etc., is in no way restricted, but unlimitedly manifested with his full boundless property. But conditioned souls are apt to assert a material conception in regard to Gokula by their miserable senses, so as to bring them below the level of their intellect. So we have, as long as our senses are contaminated by sense gratification, even though Krishna is manifesting these amazing transcendental pastimes, we have no taste for it to try and understand it, because we're contaminated. Once the contamination goes away, then all of a sudden the same thing becomes the most wonderful experience. So that's why in the beginning, when in the first canto, first chapter, first verse, it says that this world is illusory. It puts people in illusion. So people are bewildered in this material world. And so it says that only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the 3 modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. So I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditated upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Now this is a big statement. And in other words, we are all subject to this illusory material world. The material world is existing, but many things in the material world put us into illusion. what is the biggest thing that puts us into illusion? That is false definitions of words and false theories and false speculations. This is what's putting us into illusion. Therefore, the degeneration of people is going to be explained now in First Canto, 9th chapter, 18th verse. This is a very big point. That is, it says, this Sri Krishna is no other than the inconceivable original personality of Godhead. He is the first Narayana, the supreme enjoyer, but he is moving amongst the descendants of King Vrishni, just like one of us, and he is bewildering us with his self-created energy. So, false definitions, false speculative concepts, this is what puts us in trouble in the material world. Like, for example, the Sri Vaishnavas, maybe not all of them, but most of them, claim that Krishna comes from Narayana. So, here, Brahma, who's a Mahajan, what does he say? He's telling Yudhishthira, he's saying, I'm sorry, Bhisma, yeah. Brahma is also going to say it, but Bhisma first in 1:9:18 is saying, this Sri Krishna is no other than the inconceivable original personality of Godhead. He is the first Narayana, the supreme enjoyer, but he is moving amongst the descendants of King Vrishni, just like one of us, and he is bewildering us with his self-created energy. So, Prabhupada says, the Vedic system of acquiring knowledge is the deductive process. The Vedic knowledge is received perfectly by disciplic succession from authorities. Such knowledge is never dogmatic, as ill-conceived by the less intelligent persons. The mother is the authority to verify the identity of the father. She is the authority for such confidential knowledge. Therefore, authority is not dogmatic. In the Bhagavad Gita, this truth is confirmed in the second verse of the 4th chapter. Okay, so that's a very important verse. Second verse of the 4th chapter says, Evam parampara praptam imam raja sayovidu sakale naha mahata yoganasta parantapa. And we have to pay a lot of attention to this verse because Prabhupada is pointing it out here. Why? Because he's saying this is the way to be free of illusion in the material world. The supreme science, meaning Bhagavad Gita, is thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in the course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is, appears to be lost. So, here Prabhupada writes, it is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Today we don't have any saintly kings. All the leaders are low-class people. Therefore, nobody is being led or nobody is being instructed to what is the real purpose of human life. Where this was the responsibility of the leaders of society, the saintly leaders, to lead people in the right direction. We're all being misled by the leaders of society. Certainly Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demonic persons who would dissipate its value for no one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. That's what the demons do. They come up with all kinds of speculations according to their own whims and their own material desires. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to reestablish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment, also there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to the authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Sri Krishna. This spirit is demonic, because demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English, as it is received by the Parampara, disciplic succession system, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity, but if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply a waste of time. So this is why Prabhupada wrote Bhagavad Gita as it is, right? He translated it as it is, and he wrote the commentary of the acharyas. He distilled the commentary of all the previous acharyas and put it into his purports, put their realizations and Krishna's original words in his purports. Okay, so now, but now Prabhupada makes a very important point, and this is a point that we should become convinced of and actually explain to others. And it says, he says, the very same system, he says, therefore, authority is not dogmatic. In the Bhagavad Gita, this truth is confirmed in the second verse of the 4th chapter. And the perfect system of learning is to receive it from authority. The very same system is accepted universally as truth, but only the false arguer speaks against it. For example, modern spacecraft fly in the sky, and when scientists say that they travel to the other side of the moon, men believe these stories blindly because they have accepted the modern scientists as authorities. So he's saying people believe these stories blindly because they have accepted modern scientists as authorities. What is that? That they went to the other side of the moon, the dark side of the moon. The authorities speak, and the people in general believe them. But in the case of Vedic truths, they have been taught not to believe. This is what the British did. They taught the Indians not to believe the Vedas, but to believe the European science and speculation, philosophical speculation. Even if they accept them, they give a different interpretation. So even if they do accept some Vedic knowledge, they give a different interpretation to it than what it actually is. Each and every man wants a direct perception of Vedic knowledge, but foolishly, they deny it. This means that the misguided man can believe one authority, the scientist, but will reject the authority of the Vedas. The result is that people have degenerated. This amazing statement by Prabhupada, amazing statement, and he's very correct in what he's saying. Here is an authority speaking about Sri Krishna as the original personality of Godhead and the first Narayana. This is Bhisma Pitama. Even such an impersonalist as Acharya Sankara has said in the beginning of his commentation on the Bhagavad Gita that Narayana, the personality of Godhead, is beyond the material creation. The universe is one of the material creations, but Narayana is transcendental to such material paraphernalia. So you have Bhisma saying it, and you also have Sankaracharya, the leader of the impersonalists, that says the same thing, that Krishna is above the material world. Bhismadeva is one of the 12 Mahajans who know the principles of transcendental knowledge. His confirmation of Lord Sri Krishna as being the original personality of Godhead is also corroborated by the impersonalist Sankara. All other acharyas have also confirmed this statement, and thus there is no chance of not accepting Lord Sri Krishna as the original personality of Godhead. My God, but the Sri Vaishnavas don't accept it. So it's not just the demons. It's also people who are placed in positions of authority in Vaishnavism that also reject Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unbelievable. This is also confirmed by Brahmaji. So the same thing that Bhisma Pitamaha is saying, Brahmaji also is saying the same thing in the Bhagavatam 10:14. So let's see what that says. 10:14. So 10:14, Lord Brahma is speaking. He says, Narayanas tvam nahi sarva dehinam, and so forth. Are you not the original Narayana? This is Brahma speaking. O Supreme Controller, he's speaking to Krishna. Since you are the soul of every embodied being and the eternal witness of all created realms, indeed, Lord Narayana is your expansion. There it is right there. He says, where's the Sanskrit? Yeah, he says, Narayana Angam Nara Bu. So he says that Narayana is your expansion, right? And then he says, and he is called Narayana because he is the generating source of the primeval water of the universe. He is real, not a product of your illusory Maya. So now we have two major authorities, not only them, there are others also, but two big authorities, Brahma himself, the secondary creator of the material universe, and Bhisma Pitama. Both of them claim that not Narayana, but Krishna is the source of Narayana, and the first Narayana. See? So now, what are you going to do? I mean, you have people who are Vaishnavas or highly placed, who are sannyasis, who follow rules and regulations, and they have this fundamental thing wrong. It's not as bad as the atheists, but it is bad because there's some misleading going on here. That's when I went to Hyderabad, and I met this one big sannyasi there, and he has this big project there, and he shows, the different levels of the spiritual world. There's nothing about Goloka or Vrindavan in the spiritual world. There's just Vaikuntha. and he says that Krishna is the super soul, is not, and the Krishna comes from Narayana. So he also is maybe not as bad as the Mayavadis, but it's bad because he also is canceling. He's canceling Goloka and Krishna's transcendental abode above Vaikuntha. So this type of, let's say, dogmatic speculation is going on in all levels, and this causes the degeneration of people. Okay, so then it says here, in the purport to 10:14, Prabhupada writes, well, actually, Prabhupada's disciples have written this. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, chapter 2, text 30, Srila Prabhupada comments on this verse as follows. So they rightfully included Prabhupada's commentary on this verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. This statement, which is from Srimad Bhagvatam 10:14, was spoken by Lord Brahma in his prayers to Lord Krishna after the Lord had defeated him by displaying his mystic powers. Brahma had tried to test Lord Krishna to see if he was really the Supreme Personality of Godhead, playing as a cowherd boy. Brahma stole all the other boys and their calves from the pasturing grounds. But when he returned to the pastures, he saw that all the boys and calves were still there, for Lord Krishna had created them all again. When Brahma saw this mystic power of Lord Krishna's, he admitted defeat and offered prayers to the Lord, addressing him as the proprietor and seer of everything in the creation, and as the supersoul who is within each and every living entity and is dear to all. that Lord Krishna is Narayana, the father of Brahma, because Lord Krishna's plenary expansion, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, after placing himself on the Garbha ocean, created Brahma from his own body, Mahavishnu in the causal ocean, and Kshirodakshay Vishnu, the super soul in everyone's heart, are also transcendental expansions of the supreme truth. In his commentary on this verse, Sri Sanatana Goswami has elaborately explained the expansion of Vishnu, or Narayana, incarnations from the original form of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. The essence is that although Lord Brahma was born from Lord Narayana, Brahma now understands that Narayana is himself a mere expansion of the original personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. Now, how can people avoid understanding this? Only because of prejudice and having their own, let's say, agenda. You see. Okay, so therefore, so it says in the same purport of 1:9:18, Krishna is the first Narayana. In the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, the plenary expansions of the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. The first form of the Lord, Sri Krishna, first expands himself as the form Baladeva, and Baladeva expands in so many other forms such as Sankarsana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Vasudeva, Narayana, the Purusha avatars, meaning the Vishnu avatars, Rama and Nrsimha. All these expansions are one and the same Vishnu Tattva, and Sri Krishna is the original source of all the plenary expansions. He is therefore the direct personality of Godhead. He is the creator of the material world, and he is the predominating deity known as Narayana in all the Vaikuntha planets. Therefore, his movements amongst human beings are another sort of bewilderment. The Lord therefore says in the Bhagavad Gita that foolish persons consider him to be one of the human beings without knowing the intricacies of his movements. The bewilderment regarding Sri Krishna is due to the action of his twofold internal and external energies upon the third one, called the marginal energy. The living expansions, they are sometimes bewildered by the internal energy and sometimes by the external energy. By internal energetic bewilderment, Sri Krishna expands himself into unlimited numbers of Narayanas and exchanges or accepts transcendental loving service from the living entities in the transcendental world. And by his external energetic expansions, he incarnates himself in the material world amongst the men, animals, or demigods to reestablish his forgotten relation with the living entities in different species of life. Great authorities like Bhisma, however, escape his bewilderment by the mercy of the Lord. So the Lord does not only appear amongst human beings, but also in all species, because they're all his praja, and to help them all make some kind of spiritual advancement. This is all amazing information. How did Darwin understand any of this? Are these modern anthropologists understanding anything? These are not authorities. These are bogus people that are misleading, and that's why there's degeneration of people in the society today. Yeah. Okay, so we'll stop right there, and we'll continue a little bit more tomorrow. It's going to take a couple more days. It should take the rest of our life, actually, because this is explaining all about Krishna, right? Very confidential knowledge about the Supreme Lord. If we understand this, or some of it, we can convince other people. But we have to see how profound the misinformation is. It's everywhere, so all over, even amongst the Sri Vaishnavas. It's all over the place. And Prabhupada has taken the time to analyze the whole thing and reveal all the sophistry that's going on. Haribol. Prabhupada ki jai.
Only through your classes we are able to understand the level of misinformation, even all the way down to up to the Sri Vaishnava.
It's frightening. It's frightening. Yeah.
So Maharaj, what is the benefit they are getting out of it? Even within Sri Vaishnavas, they are through disciple succession. So why they are rejecting? Why why they are saying Krishna is an incarnation of Narayana. I mean, I'm assuming, I don't have much knowledge, but I'm assuming it's from the disciplic succession, so it has to be correct or authorized.
Yeah.
Is it like information got lost in between, or?
In Kali Yuga, well, 5,000 years ago, the information was lost. The disciplic succession was broken. That's why Krishna came and reestablished it through Arjuna. So this is what happens in time. Over time, things deteriorate. So he had to come back because he's in charge of the maintenance of Bhagavad Dharma. He came and he spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. See, he already had spoken it before, right? He spoke it to Ikshvaku, he spoke it to Manu, he spoke it to Surya, right? And he had to speak it again to Arjuna. The same knowledge, the same science. So over time, things deteriorate. And we can see, just even in ISKCON today, there's a whole debate going on now about changing Prabhupada's books. You see, this is the way things deteriorate. As soon as you change even one word of the Acharya's statements, then all hell breaks out. So you change one word, then you'll change two words. So as they say in French, qui vole un œuf volera un bœuf, which means if you steal an egg, later on you'll steal a buffalo. So if you can get away with changing one word, you'll get away with changing all the words if you want, you know. So unfortunately, this goes on, and that's why even if a person has one material desire, it contaminates everything else they do. One material desire is enough. And what if you have millions of material desires? Then just imagine the degree of contamination. And accepting false authorities, who are actually speculators and not real authorities, it causes the degeneration of the people. That we just read that, right? So that's why you see today the kids are being degenerated in these schools. You know, everything they're teaching in school is more or less wrong. And by the way, I'm gonna outline all those things. Like, you know, every once in a while I say, look up this word. You know, you see that the definition of the word is false. You know, or look up, you know, the origin of matter. Well, it's all speculation. They don't know what it is. They're just writing things. You know, but you know, every time we do this, we end up with some false concept or some speculation. You know, the definition of yoga, the origin of matter, how energy transforms into matter. All these things, they don't understand them. And they're fundamental. See? And there's a whole list of these things, you know. The origin of species. How did the world start? They say it's a Big Bang. It's crazy. And they teach this as science in the schools. See? And that's why people are degenerating.
This is so unfortunate for the common people.
Yeah.
Very limited set of people they are misguiding.
And then you have the modern brahmanas, so-called brahmanas, they're just teaching rituals to the Hindus for material benefit. That's another whole nonsense thing. They're misleading millions of people. You want to lead?
Chairana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Bandhamoye Savadhana Mataye
Bando Mui Savadana Mate
Bandhamoye Savadhana Mate
Bando Mui Savadana Mate
Jahara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatoriya Jai Jahara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatoriya Jai Krishna Prapti Ho Jahate
Krishna Prapti Hoya
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittite Koriya Kya Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittite Koriya Kya Arana Koriha Mane Asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asha
Shri Guru Charane Rate Ese Uttamagati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Ese
Uttamagati Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha
E Prasade Pure Sarva Asa
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
Shuddhan Dilo Janme Janme Prabhu Se
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
Gyani Devo Kasito
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाशा जाते
Prema Bhakti Chahate Avidya Vinasa Jate
वेदी गाय जहर चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनार बंधु
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनार बंधु
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu
लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना
Lokena Lokera Jivana
लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना
Lokena Lokera Jivana
आहा प्रभु करो दया देह मोरो पद जय
Ha ha Prabhu Gora Doya Deha Mori Pada Jaya
आहा प्रभु करो दया देह मोरो पद जय
हरिपदचय
आहा प्रभु गोरो दया देह मोरो पद जाया आहा प्रभु गोरो दया देह मोरो पद जाया ए बीज सघु सुख त्रिभुवाना ये भेजस्कु सुख त्रिभुवाना श्रील प्रभुपाद पतित पावना भूपाद पतित पावना जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा नमो ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदान्ता स्वामी नित्यनामिने ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदान्त स्वामी नित्यनामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 Ram, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare,
Hare
Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram
Ram, Hare Hare.
Sai Gaura, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura, Hari Bol, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Jai Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahамsa Pararaja Gachasana Sattva Shri Srimad Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Harivilas Maharaj Ki Jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samkunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the Samudra, all glories to the Samudra, all glories to the Samudra, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavan Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Bhuti Srimati Bhakti Namaste Saraswati Devi. Gauravani Pracharya. Go to Premanandi, Haribo.
Only way by which we can attain to devotion service. About his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is a perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord birth after birth. From him ecstatic fame emanates.